Hi, welcome you all to this Unacademy Unlock YouTube platform. Today, as part of our discussions, we will be looking at the ethics section A questions, which we have done earlier also. The rest of the questions we will do today. So, if you look at it, we have done some of the questions 2 days back, in fact, last week, as part of this either exercise. Let us proceed further and look at the things. First, let us start with the courses offered by Unacademy on its platform. Let us start with the courses offered by Unacademy on its platform. As you can see here, Unacademy is offering a good number of courses for the civil service examination. You can see here from 20th November to 22nd November, it's a free event wherein you will be getting the guidance from top educators. You'll be getting the guidance from the top educators of from bureaucrats and toppers and educators here. Amitabh Bhattacharya, senior most civil servant, retired from civil services and had very important responsibilities also he had. Then he will be guiding you people on he will be guiding you people on this civil services preparation, how to go about your preparation. Then we have this year's second ranker also. We also have this Durga Shakti Nagpal, one of the popular IAS officers. Then we also have this year's 10th ranker who will be guiding you on this optional of political science and international relations. And the topics, Amitabh Bhattacharya will be talking about whether you should have a plan B for this civil service examination. As we know, it is highly uncertain, and so you definitely need to have some kind of plan B. The results are highly uncertain, and you will not what we call nobody is sure about getting into civil services. So should you have a plan B or not? He will definitely speak about all those things. Then second one is Durga Shakti Nagpal, one of our former students only, and how to step out of your comfort zone, because she had done the same while she was in the service, and she had decided to take on the system also, sand mafia. She took the sand mafia for Pradesh and became popular also in the process. And Jagriti, the CS second ranker, she will be talking about what are the qualities required to become an IAS officer, what should be done. And Amanpreet, he will be sharing his experiences. So this is what, and these are all the top rankers of an academy. These are all the top rankers, and these are the batches that our academy is starting from 24th November, mission 2022, comprehensive batch for GS, and then 2 years batch for GS, and also a crash course in a mission batch for GS UPSC 2023 also. Then you also have a complete test series to crack this civil service examination. You can see here optional 21 tests and prelims and mains 80 tests, good number of tests also. And then you also have the chance to stand out from the crowd. Iconic GS plus experienced coach plus free optional. So many of them are offering by Unacademy. You also have this live mentoring platform, wherein the mentor will solve your doubts, gives you personal coaching, evaluates your answers, and it will also ensure daily answer writing, and there will also be study booster sessions. Not only that, taking into consideration the financial constraints, it is also providing you loans to prepare for this examination also. And UPSC Combat History and Polity, 50 questions, 60 minutes. This is also a good scheme. You can get into those things. So these are all the what we call the courses offered by Unacademy on its platform. Next, let us come back and look at what we are discussing now. Let us come back and look at what we are discussing now. Uh, the other day we have seen some other questions as part of our YouTube class, and then we have seen up to this question, what do you understand by probity in governance? If I am not wrong, we have seen up to this question, what do you understand by probity in governance, right? Now let us look at the rest of the questions, like the fifth B question, emotional intelligence is the ability to make your emotions work for you instead of against you. Do you agree with the view? Emotional intelligence is the ability to uh, make your emotions work for you instead of against you. Do you agree with the view? Discuss. As we have discussed previously also, right? What is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand our emotions, regulate those emotions, and also understand the emotions of others, and use that information for the benefit of your organization. That is what we have said as part of what we call emotional intelligence. If you have any doubts, you can always ask me. I am. You can always ask me as part of your comments. I will try to answer all your doubts also. Right. So definitely, this is what we will agree with the statement that emotional intelligence is the ability to, uh, you know, make your emotions work for you instead of against you. I remember, if you remember, this is what the example I have given. Take the case of anger. Anger can also be used as a constructive emotion because your subordinates are not working, and you must use your anger as a constructive emotions to explain to your subordinates, to show to your subordinates that you are not satisfied with their performance. So similarly, other emotions, as we have discussed, if you remember, we should never make any promises when you are extremely happy. Why? Because at that point of time, we will not have any control over emotions, and we'll make mostly, impossible promises which are difficult to fulfill. Also, that can create trust deficit within the society. Also, that is the reason why we have to make sure that we are using our emotions to work for us rather than working against us. And similarly, we can give other examples also where we need that kind of emotional intelligence. I gave you the example of you are a district collector, and suddenly there are 10,000 people in front of you agitating against uh, some of the policies decisions of the government. And under those circumstances, what should you do? Again, you have to use your emotional intelligence. You have to go and speak to the people there. You have to go and ask them what are the problems they are facing. And you need what we call social skills and empathy to understand their emotions. The easiest way is asking the superintendent of police to control the crowd using force. But that is not the way the government should be working. That is not the way it should be done also. What is required here is that you need to have that kind of emotional intelligence to be able to solve the problems without resorting to violence. And this is where we talk about having what we call emotional intelligence, right? And at the end of the day, as I said, we need this kind of qualities on the part of the administrators especially, and most importantly in our day-to-day life also. As I said again, if you get angry, if we get angry, we will not have any control over our language or emotions, and it destroys the human relationships. It destroys. You might be having very good friends, but in your anger, you will use the kind of language which might suggest that which might suggest that you are extremely unhappy with them, and you are not totally dissatisfied with them, and it can create enemies also, unnecessary enemies also. That is the reason why we say that anger is the worst enemy of any person, because this anger is the one which ultimately results in our downfall also. That is where we need emotional intelligence, right? We should know what our weaknesses are, we should know what our strengths are, and we must also make sure that we are able to use our weaknesses and our strengths to work for you rather than against you, right? This is what you have to write for this question. For this kind of questions, you have to give lots of examples to write answers. For example, yesterday the Prime Minister has announced that he would be repealing these farm laws. Why? Because again, emotional intelligence. because he knew that there is so much of opposition to these formulas, and he has failed to connect with the people regarding the significance of those formulas. That is where the social skills of the government have been a failure. And then also the government is seen as a very dictatorial government. When thousands of farmers were agitating there on the outskirts of Delhi for months and months together, obviously it will have impact on the electoral outcomes also. That is the reason why the government has wisely decided that they would repeal those formulas. That is where we talk about again emotional intelligence, right? So from that we can move on to the next question. What do you, what do each of the following quotations mean to you? As you know, every year this is what UPSC will be doing. They will be giving the previous year's. They will be giving some quotations of the philosophers, and they will ask you to explain those things. And mostly, we have to remember here is that every year one quotation will always be there from Mahatma Gandhi. So what I would suggest is that we can go to internet, we can find out the quotations of Mahatma Gandhi, and if you see them, half of them must have been asked in the UPSC examination only. That is how you can reduce the predictability of this question paper also. They will be taking the quotations of Aristotle, Socrates, Mahatma Gandhi, and then of course Thiruvalvar, from Tamil Nadu, and Swami Vivekananda. These are the philosophers that UPSC would be quoting most of the time. So let us look at this quotation. An unexamined life is not worth living, Socrates. Very beautiful statement. So what is the meaning of this statement? What do you think is the meaning of this statement? An unexamined life is not worth living. So you please tell me what do you mean by, what do you understand by this statement? An unexamined life is not worth living. Because when these kind of questions come in the examination, how do you tackle them? That's more. That's where you require a lot of presence of mind also, right? So what do you understand by this statement? An unexamined life is not worth living. What do you understand by the statement? Right? An unexamined life is not worth living. Being rational towards what we do. Not that one. Life without goals, that is also not the answer. Being rational towards what we do. Life without goals, no. Okay, let us try to understand. An unexamined life, you should examine your mistakes and improve upon it. Okay, good. What you think you must be putting into practice. Okay, fine. Right? Okay. An unexamined life, what does it mean? Keeping check on our values, emotions, right? Okay. Okay. Let us see what it exactly it is. An unexamined means, that means you are not evaluating anything that is in front of you. You are blindly following what is being taught to you. You are blindly following what is being taught to you. You are blindly following the traditions and customs. You are blindly following the cultures. You are blindly following the laws, rules, and regulations. You are blindly following the values of the society. That is what we say. You should never accept anything. That is what we always say. We should never accept anything without evaluating it in a rational manner, without examining it whether it is true or not. I'll just give you an example here. Exactly, superstitions. I'll just give you an example here. Take the case of this caste system that we have in our country. Take the case of caste system we have in our country. And what do we do here? We blindly have a faith in this caste system. thinking that it is extremely rigid and we should follow it. But why? We never ask the question why we should follow this caste system. We never try to examine the fact that when we take birth, we are taking birth as human beings, and when we die, again we die as human beings. This is where we blindly follow them, blindly follow the traditions and customs without evaluating their merits and demerits. This is similarly, the government is coming out with a law which is what we call draconian in nature, and out of fear we accept all those things without questioning them. That is where again unexamined life. Take the case of Mahatma Gandhi. Had Mahatma Gandhi not started the protest against these highly discriminatory laws in the South Africa against the Indians and also the blacks and other races in South Africa by the white community there would not have been any freedom movement in the country. If you had blindly followed those things, please remember these are all the examples that you have to give while writing answers in the examination. Why unexamined life is not worth living, right? This is where it becomes important for us to question them. Take the case of Raja Ram Mohan Rai. When he had questioned this Sati, or Ishwar Chandra Vijayasagar, when he had questioned the child marriages, when they have questioned these patriarchal societies, that is where we have seen reforms in our society. That is the reason why we say that an unexamined life is not worth living. Similarly, take the case of Ambedkar, when he had questioned the rationale behind this untouchability. That is when only we have seen reforms. That is when only we have seen the fact that a society can progress. The progress of any society depends on the ability of the people to question. And unfortunately, right now, what we are witnessing in our society is that, unfortunately, what we are witnessing in our society is that people are accepting it. People are accepting everything without questioning. They have become so docile. For example, they never ask the government when the global crude prices are going down, why should we pay so much of high prices in the form of taxes? What are you doing with that money? We don't ask those questions. That is the reason why, in the name of representative democracy, we have only what is called electoral dictatorship. This is where we say an unexamined life is not worth living. Right? This is what you have to write for this question. And as I said, again, the basic problem with our education system is it would never allow the students to ask questions. In the schools as well as colleges, wherever you go, you expect, the teachers expect you to blindly mug up all those things that are being taught in the class without asking any questions. That is the reason why we in our society do not produce the intellectuals. We do not produce those Nobel Prize winners. Why? Because we are asked to simply follow what is being taught to us, an unexamined life. That slavish mentality, the slavish attitude is what we say is the problem here. Right? So, shall we move on to the next question? Right. Next, a man is but, I said, Mahatma Gandhi quotations are very, very important. Mahatma Gandhi quotations are very important. Every year they keep on asking those things only. So, what do we say here? A man is but a product of his thoughts. What he thinks is what he becomes. That is what the question says, the statement says. A man is nothing but a product of his thoughts. What he thinks, he becomes. So, what is the meaning of the statement? Our personality, our character, our behavior, our actions are always guided by our thoughts. That is what the statement says. Our personality, our character, our actions, our behavior is always guided by our thoughts. What he thinks is what he becomes also. Right? That is what Mahatma Gandhi says. And that is the reason why Gautam Buddha, as part of his philosophy, says that we must change our thought process. We should develop a mental culture. Yes, you should develop a mental culture wherein it is guided by love, empathy, selflessness, and you know, uh, honesty and integrity. That is what we say, right? Right. That is what we say. That is the reason why all these philosophers talk about developing a personality. At the end of the day, it is our personality that determines our actions also. It is our environment that shapes our personality also. That is what we have to remember. As Akash has also pointed out, it is our environment. For example, take the case of India. What happened with this liberalization, privatization, globalization in the last 30 years or so? We have moved towards what is called materialistic societies. People are becoming more inward in terms of their thought process. They are becoming more selfish in terms of their behavior and actions. There is nothing like what we call social consciousness. The social quotient in our society is coming down drastically. We are becoming immune to what is happening around us. Why? Because I just said our thought process is guided by what is happening in our society. In our materialistic societies, what really is important is whether you have become successful or not. It does not really matter how you have become successful. So our thought process is always about how to deceive people, how to cheat people, how to manipulate people, and in the process how to make profits. If you are a doctor, if you are a doctor, what do you do? If you are a doctor, what do we do? You always think about how to extract as much money from the patients as possible. So you will always prescribe hundreds of tests to your patients so that you can got a lot of money, even though you know that it is not necessary. Why? Because your thought process is all about how to make profits. If you are a businessman, you always think about how to deceive your customers. If you are a politician, you always think about how to deceive your people through populistic slogans and measures. That is the reason why you can see in our present materialistic societies that it is very difficult to find what we call a good human being. Any institution that we find here, is not functioning effectively for the simple reason that those who are manning those institutions simply are not guided by the highest ethical values. And you can see during the freedom movement, that most of our freedom fighters, they have joined the freedom movements not to share the benefits of power, not to share the spoils of power, but to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the country. For the sake of the country. What we see is that before the emergence of this industrial revolution, before the emergence of these materialistic societies, people had more what is called the societal consciousness, which it is lacking right now. Why? Because what you think is what you become. From the childhood onwards, the parents will always tell their children that the only thing that really matters in their life is how to become successful. They never speak about the fact that they should be good also. Neither the parents, nor the education system, nor the role models in our society talk about the importance of being good in our society. And your thought process is always guided by this idea that you should always be using all your intelligence to maximize your profits and maximize your income. That is the reason why we are witnessing so much of denigration in our societies. And you become a religious fanatic because you believe that your religion is the most superior religion and the rest of all the people in the world should follow your religion. Your thought process is what that makes you a terrorist. Your thought process is what that really makes you a terrorist. Your thought process is what that really makes you an extremely cunning businessman. Your thought process is what really makes you a very corrupt politician. It is your thought process that makes you a very corrupt politician. Similarly, your thought process is the one that makes you a Gautam Buddha as well as Jesus Christ also. Both Jesus Christ and Gautam Buddha have sacrificed their life. Why? Because In their heart of, in their core of heart, they were only thinking about humanity, human civilization, and the overall welfare of people around them. That is the reason why they could become such great people. And it is the thought process that normally has transformed a young boy Narendra into a Swami Vivekananda. And it is the thought process that converted a poor young boy, from Rameshwaram into Abdul Kalam. Right? That is what the question says. Right? Please remember, for all these kind of questions, as I keep on saying, you have to give lots of examples. Right? So shall we move on to the next question? If you have any doubts, you can ask. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next question. Right. Where there is righteousness in the heart, there is beauty in the character. Where there is beauty in the character, there is harmony in the home. Where there is harmony in the home, there is order in the nation. When there is order in the nation, there is peace in the world. Abdul Kalam. Right? This is the statement of Abdul Kalam. The statement itself is 250 words. It is 250 words. You have to write 150 words answer. The statement is 250 words and you have to write 150 words. So you will write, yes, I agree that where there is righteousness in the heart, there is beauty in the character. And I also believe that where there is beauty in the character, there is harmony in the home. Obviously, where there is harmony at home, there is order in the nation. When there is order in the nation, there is peace in the world. You repeat the statement, the answer is over also. Right? You repeat the statement, the answer is also over. The good thing about this ethics paper is that some of the statements are so long that you don't have to do anything also. You don't have to do anything also. Right? Right? So that is what you have to write. Let us try to understand this thing. This is what we study in our ethics paper also. Right? This is what we study in our ethics paper also. It is from the individual we move on to the family, from family to the nation, from the nation to the world. That is what we say. So how do we link all of them? How do we link all of them? That is what you have to think about. How do we link all of them? As we say, as we have just discussed for the previous question also, when you are good at heart, what is needed, the most important and essential thing that is needed for us is goodness in the heart. When you are good at the core of your heart, there will always be beauty in your character. Right? You will automatically become a good human being. Please remember, good human beings are always like a magnet. They can attract any number of people. And what do we mean by this being good? Righteousness. What do we mean by this righteousness in the character? It means that we must be in a position to sacrifice our self-interest for the sake of others. It means that we should have empathy. We should have empathy when it comes to other people. It means that it means that our heart should feel the sufferings of other people. It means that we should always have love and compassion towards others. That is what we say. So when we are a good person, as the statement says here, when we are a good person, there is always a harmony in the home, because you will not enter into unnecessary conflicts with the people. You will not unnecessarily fight with the people. You will not exploit people. You will not deceive people. You will not manipulate people. A husband will not be cheating on his wife. A wife will not be cheating on his husband. Children will be loyal to their children will be loyal to their parents, and the parents will be extremely taking care of their children. That is what we say harmony at home. When there is harmony at home, what is a nation? Nation does not mean forests or rivers. A nation does not mean land and soil. A nation does not mean industries and institutions. A nation consists of people. And when the people of the country are good, when the people of country are good, automatically there will be order in the nation. You don't require any rules and regulations. When people are honest and good, you don't require rules and regulations. They will follow all the rules and regulations in both letter and spirit. When there is order in the nation, if every country in the world is like this, wherein people are sacrifice their self-interest, people are honest, they are efficient, they are hardworking, they are sincere, they have empathy, then there will be peace in the world. A beautiful statement made by Abdul Kalam. On the other hand, what is the problem? On the other hand, what is the problem here is that on the other hand, the problem here is that in our world, unfortunately, we don't find these things. We don't find these things wherein people are they have righteousness in the heart, they have the character, and they also have the values which we have spoken about. That is the reason why we have so many conflicts in the world between the countries, because everyone is guided by self-interest. That is also the reason why within the country again there are so many conflicts, and that is also the reason why within the household also there is so much of problem between the people, between the members of the household. That is the reason why we say that what is required is that is the reason why we say that what is required is what is required is righteousness in the heart, and so that your character is reflected in the functioning of your house as well as the society, right? This is what you have to write for this question, right? Again, as I said, giving examples only, that's what is important for these kind of questions. So shall we move on to the next question? I think we have completed 1 year's question paper. We will be going to the next year. Shall we move on to the next question? Right. You can see the question here. State the 3 basic values universal in nature. Universal in nature in the context of civil services and bring out their importance. Right? The question says state 3 basic values universal in nature in the context of civil services and bring out their importance. Right? That is what the question says. The most important part of the question is universal in nature. As we studied in our ethics paper, there are certain values which are universal, absolute. There are so many other values which are relative in nature. So what are the important universal values that we have discussed? Empathy, selflessness, and love and affection towards everyone else. Arju, I think this might be, if I am not wrong, 2018 question paper. If I am not wrong, 2018 I think. Yes, 2018 question paper. Right. Yes. So the 3 important universal values which we can talk about are empathy, selflessness, yeah, Aditya mentioned the sacrifice, or love and affection. Any of them you can write. Why they are important from the examination point of view, from a civil services point of view. Why they are important? from civil services point of view. Why empathy is important? Why empathy is important? As we studied in our civil services values, we said if civil servants have empathy, nothing else matters. If civil servants have empathy, we said nothing else matters. And if they don't have empathy, again nothing else matters. Why? When they have empathy, they will be selfless. They will sacrifice their self-interest. There will be what is called love and affection. They will be honest. They will have integrity. They will be impartial. They will be non-partisan. All other civil services values, all other values can be derived from what we said, empathy. As I said, when Ashok Kenka was asked what is needed for a successful civil servant, he simply said, nothing is required except that they should have empathy. You don't require the knowledge of constitution. You don't require, the knowledge of rules and regulations. You don't require the global events. You don't require any of those things. You don't require any of those things. You need only empathy. When a person is under water for 2 days, for around up to neck deep water for 2-3 days, you don't require the knowledge of rules and regulations to help that person. What is required is empathy. Imagine yourself, put yourself in the position of that person who is there in the water without food and sleep for such a long period of time. Do you look for rules and regulations? Do you look for constitution and fundamental rights to help that person? Not at all required. That is what we say. And second one is selflessness. The basic problem with civil servants is that they're always guided by selfish interest. They look for promotions, they look for transfers, they look for postings, they look for post-retirement benefits also. Because of which they can never ensure honest and efficient functioning. For example, take the case of this Ajit Doval. He got into civil services in 1968. He got into IPS in 1968. And he has been there in the government for the last 43 years in the government. Right? Sorry, 53 years in the government. Last 53 years. 1968. 53 years you are there in the government means definitely you will be compromising with your value system. That's the reason why he speaks always the language of the government, not of the people. Language of a very dictatorial, in a strong and powerful government. That is where selflessness becomes important. Why? Because the civil servants are expected to provide this unbiased, meritorious and rational solutions to the political executive. They can do so only when they are completely selfless. As long as they are attached to their positions, perks and post-retirement benefits, they will be deceiving themselves only. That is the reason why selflessness becomes very important. Next important value that we have mentioned is love and affection towards people. A very important value. As a civil servant, when you are expected to serve the society and people belonging to different sections of society, you will be serving scheduled castes, you will be serving scheduled tribes, you will be serving minorities, you will be serving tribals, you will be serving people of different ethnicity and races. And what is required is love and affection. As we discussed, love is the emotion that we have for our own people, whereas affection is a much larger one, is the emotion which we have for everyone in the world, irrespective of whether they are known to us or whether they are close to us or not. And that is what is required here. You must be able to have that kind of affection towards every section of society so that you will not be partial and biased and prejudiced in terms of your behavior. So that you will always come to the rescue of the people. So that you will always help people in a selfless manner. This is what you have to write for this question. This is what you have to write for this question. Give the example here. The last year, the country had witnessed the worst crisis of migrants walking for hundreds of kilometers. Since most of the civil servants did not possess those values, these migrants had to suffer also. On the other hand, those civil servants possessed these values made sure that when they travel to their districts, they are provided all kinds of basic necessities also. That is what you have to write for this question, right? Shall we move on to the next question? Yes. Right. Nayak, integrity is related to the institution. It is not a universal value. It is related to the institution. When we talk about integrity, we always talk about the institution. For example, you are working for the government. You are protecting the interests of the government. But the problem is that when the government itself becomes highly exploitative in nature, you still have to protect the interests of the government. So it is not a universal value. Right? Next question. Distinguish between code of ethics and code of conduct with suitable examples. Distinguish between code of ethics and code of conduct with suitable examples. As we have discussed in our classes also, why did this code of conduct and code of ethics had come into existence? Starting with the code of conduct. This code of conduct had come into existence initially during East India Company's time, when Robert Clive and other company officials had become very corrupt. They were causing huge amount of financial damage to the East India Company with their own private businesses by accepting lots of gifts from the local princes. That is when Lord Cornwallis, who had become the Governor General, decided to come out with a code of conduct for company civil servants. The objective of this code of conduct was to prevent negative behavior. The objective of code of conduct was to prevent negative behavior of civil servants, of company servants, to make sure that they will not work against the interests of the company. That is the reason why in those days code of conduct included debarring the company official from accepting bribes or gifts, and prohibiting the company officials from having their own separate personal trade also. Then company officials making their annual income and expenditure statement submitting it to the East India Company directors. Then company officials not being allowed to buy any immovable assets within the country. These were part of code of conduct. Later, more were added to code of conduct when the administration was transferred from East India Company to the British Crown after 1858. They included this value neutrality, rule orientation, hierarchy, then most importantly, this secrecy as part of code of conduct. Civil servants expect to maintain utmost secrecy in their functioning. They should be completely value neutral. They should strictly implement the rules and regulations. They should follow the orders of their superior, and they should maintain utmost discipline within the organization. All of them were added. After independence, we have added more to the code of conduct of civil servants after independence. So what did we do after independence? The government of India has added most vital component, that is political neutrality of civil servants. Civil servants were not given any opportunity to participate in elections. They could not make any political statements as long as they are in service. They could not show their political affiliations in the public. They could not show their political affiliations in the public, and they should, if their relatives are contesting elections, they should inform the government in advance also. And then this code of conduct also focused on other things like preventing the civil servants from accepting bribes, and also following the orders of their superiors, and also they should not indulge in indiscipline. They should not enter into conflicts with their fellow employees. They should always ensure harmony within the organization. They should not take dowry These are all part of code of conduct, right? So later, second Administrative Reforms Commission went into these aspects, and it was felt that this code of conduct was preventing the negative behavior but not promoting positive values among the civil servants. It was preventing negative behavior but not promoting positive values among the civil servants. That is the reason why it has recommended code of ethics. It has seen the code of ethics of different countries. Nolan Committee in United Kingdom submitted this code of ethics. So is United Nations. So is these OECD countries. On the basis of the recommendations of these committees and commissions, second ERC has also proposed a code of ethics for our civil servants. Why? Why? Because civil servants in this welfare state are expected to perform not only regulatory functions, more importantly, they should also be performing what we call developmental functions also. These developmental functions require radically different values, and that is the reason why they should know what are the values they must possess also. Because code of conduct mostly focused on preventing the negative behavior, but it did not focus on promoting positive values. That is when it has spoken about this code of ethics. It has said that the civil servants should have the knowledge of code of ethics. And what are the important values they must possess? Second, RC has suggested all the values that were suggested by all the committees also. Honesty, integrity, selflessness, then empathy, then impartiality, non-partisanship, transparency, commitment to public services, then commitment to the ideals of the constitution, socialism, secularism, accountability, participation, decentralization. These are all the values that civil servants must possess. As we study why this code of ethics is important, because the objectives of good governance, that is what we study. We say that the objectives of good governance can be achieved only with ethical governance. And this ethical governance is possible only with code of ethics. Because they are expected to bring about the socio-economic transformation of the society. In the process, they will be facing a lot of challenges from the vested interests. For example, you are working towards empowering weaker sections of society as a district collector. Then it can cause heartburn among the forward sections, forward class. They will try to revolt. You need that courage of conviction to continue with your reforms. You need that kind of perseverance to continue with what you are doing. That is the reason why this code of ethics is very important. Unfortunately, even the Second Administrative Reforms Commission has suggested this code of ethics for our civil servants in 2009 itself. We are still in 2021 and nothing has been done on this count. On the other hand, second ERC has suggested that there should be civil services code, which should be a combination of a public services code, which should be a combination of code of ethics and code of conduct, but it was never implemented by the government. Why? Because no government which is in power, whether it is the state level or at the central level, wants a bureaucracy which is honest, efficient, and most importantly neutral. They don't want that kind of bureaucracy. That is the reason why this code of ethics remains only on paper. Right? It only remains on paper. So, shall we move on to the next question? Yes? Right. Let us go to the next question. What is meant by public interest? What are the procedures and principles to be followed by the civil servants in public interest? What is meant by public interest? What are the procedures and principles to be followed by civil servants to ensure public interest? A very good question, right? Two parts of the question. What is meant by public interest? What are the principles and procedures to be followed in securing public interest? So let us start with what is meant by public interest. As the simple meaning, it says that anything that helps or maximizes the welfare of people can be called public interest. This is where we talk about Jeremy Bentham, utilitarianism. If you remember, we have discussed these philosophers, political philosopher Jeremy Bentham, utilitarianism. What did he said? What did he say there as part of goodness? He said that an action can be considered good on the part of the government, or a policy of the government can be called good provided it benefits maximum number of people. It brings maximum welfare to maximum number of people for longest periods of time. For longest periods of time. That is what the principle that we should follow to ensure public interest. That is the principle that we should follow to ensure public interest. Public interest means anything that empowers citizens, anything that maximizes welfare of citizens, anything that helps in providing solutions to the problems faced by the citizens, anything that helps in ensuring public order, law and order is what we call public interest. You need stability, you need peace, you need development, you need empowerment. All of them combined together, what we call public interest. What are the principles and procedures to be followed by the civil servants in public interest? What are the principles they should follow? The first principle, as I have mentioned just now, the Bentham's utilitarianism. Bentham's utilitarianism. For example, when the government is giving subsidies, is it in the public interest? Definitely not. Why? Because either the subsidies are given by the governments only to win elections, but not to maximize their welfare for longest periods of time. It is not in public interest because at the end of the day, these subsidies are providing only what we call short-term benefits to the people. So the first principle that we are talking about is Bentham's, right? Second principle is the civil servant should always look at one thing: short-term political populism versus long-term economic growth and development. The second principle they should always look at is short-term political populism versus long-term economic growth and development of the country. They should always evaluate public interest in terms of these things. As we have discussed, civil servants should always provide unbiased, meritorious, rational suggestions to the political executive. Unbiased, meritorious, and rational suggestions to the political executive. So, they should always make sure that whatever the suggestions they are giving, they should always make sure that they are not compromising the long-term benefits of the society for short-term welfare of the people. This is the second principle that they have to follow. Third important principle they have to follow is what is called protecting the ecological systems environment. That is what we have to see. This is what we studied. That is what we say also. They must take into consideration the question that was asked this year in your Indian economy also. They must take into consideration two things here: intergenerational and intragenerational equity. Civil servants should always take into consideration intergenerational and intragenerational equity. That means whatever the decisions that they take, should always empower the weaker sections of the society in the present. That means whatever the decisions they take should always ensure that the poor people are empowered. The poorest sections of our society are empowered. Whatever the decisions they take, they should make sure that the poorest sections of our society are empowered. Whatever the decisions that they take, they must make sure that it results in what we call in a redistribution of income and wealth in favor of the poorer sections of society. This is a very important principle they should take into consideration. Next important principle, as we have said, is protecting the environment, what we call intra-generational equity. They must make sure that they are not compromising with the interests of the future generations. They are not compromising with the interests of the future generations while fulfilling the needs of the present generation. They must maintain ecological equilibrium, environmental protection. Right now, what is happening all around the world is that in the name of satisfying the needs of the present generation, they are ruthlessly exploiting the environment. Obviously, that is the reason why we are also witnessing so many those natural disasters. They can no longer be called natural disasters because it is not the nature that is causing the disaster. They can be called unnatural disasters because it is the human beings, because of their greed, that is causing those disasters. That is the reason why civil servants should always make sure that they are protecting the interests of the future generations. What are the other principles and procedures they should follow? They should always ensure complete transparency in governance. The procedure is always ensuring complete transparency in governance, so that people will come to know about what is happening within the government. Wherever there is secrecy, there is always scope for corruption, misuse of power, nepotism, and favoritism. That is the reason why civil servants in public interest should always ensure transparency in governance. They should implement this right information in both letter and spirit. And they should make sure that there cannot be any scope for secrecy within the government. Because as we studied, citizens are sovereign and they should know what their governments are doing for them. Very, very important. This is another important principle they should keep in mind while serving the public interest. What are the other principles that they should keep in mind while serving the public interest? Next important principle they should keep in mind is they should always sacrifice their self-interest for the sake of the country and the society. For example, take the case of 73rd and 74th amendments, whose basic objective is to ensure decentralization of power. What is the reason why these 73rd and 74th amendments have not been successful? Because civil servants do not have the ethics. They do not follow the principles. They always make sure that the entire power is concentrated only in their hand. This tendency to concentrate power onto their hands is the one which is causing a huge amount of damage to the public interest. That is the reason why these democratic institutions at the end of the day are not at all effective in terms of their function. These democratic institutions are not efficient in spite of the fact that we have almost 30 years of these essential democratic reforms. That is the reason why they should always make sure that they sacrifice their self-interest. Next important principle that they should keep in mind is they should be completely impartial and non-partisan in terms of their functioning. They are expected to give, as we say all the time, unbiased, impartial and rational suggestions to the political executive. Because the political executive is always guided by what we call immediate short-term political interests. And most of the time, they take decisions, this political executive most of the time take decisions which can be called populistic, but can cause huge amount of damage to the people in the long term. That is the reason why these civil servants, because at the end of the day, as we study, ultimately the policy decisions are taken by the political executive only. But as a civil servant, as Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel would always say, as a civil servant, your job is to say no to what the minister says and not to say yes. You are not there to be the yes boss kind of secretaries in the government. This is what the civil servant should always do. They should be having that kind of courage of conviction to provide this kind of advice. Right? These are the principles and these are the procedures that should be followed by civil servants in public interest. I think the time is up. I think we have completed the time. I think the time is up. Uh, so I think we can stop it here for now, and we will continue with this question answer session in the evening class also at 5 o'clock. Till then, take care of yourself. Best of luck.